Another edition of Beat the Closing Number presented by thelines.com. We're breaking down early NFL Week 15 odds, some bets for us, and some movement when it comes to look-ahead lines. But before we get into it, remember to give the video a thumbs up and ring the bell to get notifications whenever the Lines releases new sports betting videos. We have college football bowl games and betting previews for all those coming out in the coming weeks, as I think bowl season starts on Saturday. So be sure to check those out on the YouTube page, along with in our audio-only podcast. Subscribe, rate, and review to this podcast, along with the rest of the Lines content on Apple, Spotify, wherever you find your favorite podcast. Just search The Lines, one word. Mo, we are 33-17 when it comes to NFL bets this season, 2-2 in Week 14, or actually 2-1 with spreads and totals with the Giants pending. And we'll get into Monday Night Football at the back end of this podcast for anybody listening to the audio-only version, as the video is released on Tuesdays. Mo, how did Week 14 go for you so far individually?
Pretty good. Not a high volume week, but did well on the stuff so far. And still have some Giants action that apparently, according to you, the market's on my side. I haven't looked, so sounds like it moved in my favor a little bit. Yeah,
we got it down from 6.5 to 6. And like I said, we'll handicap that game in about 30, 40 minutes or so. But pretty good week for me as well. I hit a half unit bet on the Patriots first half on Thursday night. I did not want to go a full unit for a Thursday night football game. Learned my lesson there in the past on a short week, but still cashed. Falcons -1.5 did not hit. Buccaneers scoring a touchdown in the final couple minutes. Bears dominated the Lions. Jared Goff struggling in cold weather. You could pretty much put that one on repeat. And Bills Moneyline. We'll get to that game against the Chiefs. I hit with Buffalo. You mentioned to me before the podcast that you thought Kansas City outplayed the Bills. Yards per play shows that, but we'll dive into the game in a little bit when we get to their respective Week 15 matchups. So good season for me so far, 36-16-1. And if you're looking to get in on any NFL Week 15 action, be sure to use our promo code with BetMGM Sportsbook, the Lines one word, just like our podcast. And you can get up to $1,500 back in bonus bets if your first bet loses. Again, promo code the Lines one word. Remember that bonus bets are not equivalent to real money. And as always, terms and conditions apply. Mo, we kick it off with Thursday Night Football. Chargers and Raiders, Las Vegas, sitting at a flat 3-point home favorite, total of 33.5. And if you're wondering why it's such a low total, well, no Justin Herbert, as he fractured his finger against the Broncos in the first half. Chargers lose outright to Denver as a result by 17, closing as a field goal favorite. The Chargers have now gone under their win total in each of the last 5 seasons. And if you know the term chargering, that result when it comes to season-long futures probably doesn't surprise you too much. And if you look at how that game played out against Denver really quick, and then I'll swing it to you, Mo, Chargers didn't score on their first red zone possession. That was a result of a Russell Wilson interception inside the 10 or 15-yard line. And Denver cashed on their first red zone trip, which was a product of a Justin Herbert pick. So a little bit of variance both ways, but Chargers' red zone offense has actually been pretty efficient so far this year. I believe top 10 or top 15, at least above average going into the game. And the Chargers didn't convert on a 4th and 1 in plus territory to start the second half with Easton Stick, and that led to a Russell Wilson to Sutton touchdown for the Broncos, put them up 17-zip, and pretty much iced the game. Maybe I don't know your take on Chargers-Raiders, but I thought the Chargers got the benefit of some pretty crappy negative variance, whether you look at short yardage situations like the 4th down or red zone inefficiency or just plain old injury luck. But what have you made of the Chargers so far this year and as it relates to their matchup against the Raiders?
I mean, it seems like they've definitely been on the downswing. Obviously, the pretty poor game they had against the Patriots where, they did escape with a W, but scored literally 6 points. Wouldn't expect that to happen too often going forward. And then, they got outplayed by the Broncos. I think that's pretty clear. Herbert did not have a good game. Like, I know that he got hurt, whatever, but given what he was producing on his way to that injury, I mean, his line was pretty disgusting. 96 yards on 17 passing attempts, took 4 sacks. That's not going to cut it against even like some of the worst teams in the NFL, which is why they had a close game with the Patriots, right, the prior week. So, this is a really interesting one because of the injury and the big line move. I am interested in the Chargers, even though I'm guessing Easton Stick is probably one of the worst backups in the NFL. He's a hometown boy from here. Went to Creighton Prep High School, about 7-minute drive that way. So anytime you can fade a guy who went to Creighton Prep, it's probably a good thing, but I might be on the other side. So, I mean, Aiden O'Connell's been pretty bad too. The Raiders have basically been staying in games with their defense for the most part since O'Connell took over and McDaniels was shown the door. Given what Herbert was putting up in the last 2 games, game and a half, I guess you would want to call it, it's pretty hard for me to buy a 7-point move here. I mean, the Chargers were like -4. As this moves a touchdown here against a bad team still, I would also look in this game for maybe some Quentin Johnston props. Man, he's been so bad this year, but it kind of did seem like he had some rapport with Easton Stick when he came in. I mean, Easton Stick hit him for multiple big plays, ended up with like 90-something yards. I'm guessing because of how bad his season numbers have been, and a computer is basically just going to spit these numbers out, it's going to be something low. I think his total probably going to be like 40 or something. I might try to hit some Easton Stick to Quentin Johnston overs here as well.
You look at the Raiders against the Vikings, as you mentioned, their defense keeping them in that game. A 3-0 win for Minnesota. The live total in the fourth quarter, which isn't surprising based on the final score, but you never see. I don't remember the last time this has ever happened. A live total of 6.5 juice to the over in the fourth. And obviously that only happens in scoreless games in the fourth quarter, which is a rarity. You mentioned the Patriots-Chargers game, and we said that was one of the worst games in NFL history last week, or going back to week 13. That was one of the worst NFL games ever, for sure. Las Vegas getting outgained. Either way, 3.8 to 3.3 yards per play is pretty horrific.
They outgained yards per play, but they had enough less plays that Vikings had more total yards, I believe, is what happened in that game. So not a lot to write home about with either offense, for sure.
Aiden O'Connell, for me, you mentioned this is Easton Stick, kind of like a homecoming from afar for you, at least in primetime. Aiden O'Connell went to my high school. So I'm right there with you. He's obviously way younger than me, but went to Stevenson. So a little bit of mano-a-mano here. I don't think I'm going to have any action on the Raiders. So that isn't going to trigger any sort of a hometown bet for me. I agree. This is Chargers or pass. Maybe I would consider LA a little bit more if this wasn't on a short week. I like your Johnston look, just with the notion that the Raiders kind of play off coverage and should leave for some separation. Although I kind of think his production, maybe it was a little bit of passive defense by the Broncos late in the second half, which I think led to those two explosive connections between Easton Stick and Johnston. But Surtain having, I think, pretty much shadowing Keenan Allen for much of that game yesterday. So keep that in mind too when it came to Johnston's productivity. But maybe that leads to something down the stretch. And like you said, it's not like his numbers are going to be super inflated based on one game in terms of Johnston's receiving yard total. So maybe that's worth a look. Maybe you look towards the Chargers just because is the line movement justified? Short week of prep, though, for Easton. I don't think I'm going to touch this game, Thursday night game. Just another gross Thursday night game. Total of 33.5. Not as bad as the Patriots-Steelers game. That one went over the total after it closed around 30. As we mentioned on last week's podcast, tied for the lowest total since 1993. So actually turned out to be a decent game from a scoring standpoint, at least as it regards to the betting market. But pass for me on Thursday Night Football. Any closing thoughts, Mo, before we hit on your Kansas City Chiefs?
I would just say that I get where you're coming from, but at the same time, I mean, Quentin Johnson wasn't even getting anything in garbage time with Justin Herbert. So the fact that he was able to produce something at least maybe tells me Easton Stick is looking for him, where I don't think he had his quarterback's trust, and rightfully so with some of the poor play he's had this year. Not going to sit here and tell you I blame Justin Herbert for that at all.
Yeah, the drop against the Packers a few weeks ago cost him a first down and cost him a chance to either tie the game or win the game in Green Bay, which has spurred this Packers win streak heading into their matchup on Monday night as we're recording this before Packers and Giants. On to the Chiefs. I believe they may be back up to 10, but right around a 9.5, 10-point road favorite in Foxborough, total of 37.5. And including the loss to the Bills yesterday, 4 of the Chiefs' 5 losses could conceivably be pinned on their receivers. If you go back to week 1, with Kadarius Toney's drop turning into a pick six, you also had pretty egregious drops on their final possession by Valdes-Scantling and Sky Moore. You go back to week 8 in Denver, Sky Moore dropping a potential game-winning touchdown before the Broncos expanded their lead to 2 possessions, I believe. In week 11, the loss to the Eagles with Valdes-Scantling dropping a potential game-winning touchdown. You remember that one along with probably the rest of our audience pretty clearly. And then yesterday, Kadarius Toney offsides on a game-winning touchdown that he would have produced on a heck of a play from Travis Kelce. By the way, we'll get to Mahomes and his crybaby-like mentality after the game, but saying that play or the flag impacting Travis Kelce's Hall of Fame resume is kind of egregious in its own right. But before we get your thoughts on the game, though, because I know you have plenty of them, I want to ask you, of these 4 potential new Taylor Swift singles, at least title-wise, which one do you like most? These are spinoffs off of some of her current singles in the past. Bad Blood with Kadarius Toney. I Knew You Were Trouble, Kadarius Toney. ... Kadarius Toney. Would've, could've, should've beat the Bills. Or, this one's my favorite, by the way, if I had to give a vote.
You're not supposed to tell me that before.
Well, I think you would guess, because I thought it was my most creative one. 'Tis the damn season for Patrick Mahomes to finally get screwed over by the refs. I like that the most. Which one do you like most?
Probably the second one.
I Knew You Were Trouble, Kadarius Toney.
Probably should have known when the Giants spent a first-round pick on you and don't want you on their team that maybe something's a little off.
You don't like the last one?
That being said, I was a Kadarius Toney stan out of the draft, so I guess he just never gonna have it upstairs. So, but you see the dynamic plays at times, even when they try to give him a little bit of like Deebo Samuel treatment because he's been kind of obviously had some of the poor play lining up out wide. So giving him some carries to try to give him a little more utilization in the offense, and it's been successful at times. I mean, he ripped off a couple decent runs this week as well. But yeah, I mean, just crazy the season he's had. I mean, the stuff of nightmares, you know?
Yeah, that was nightmarish. I mean, from a flag, just to even have that kind of a situation where your wide receiver lines up off sides. And then to sum it all up, you have Mahomes telling Josh Allen after the game, I could not believe that, man. Like, for a quarterback, Josh Allen beats you in a huge game to keep his season alive. Mind you, he has lost 2 playoff games to you that have ruined his season. I'm not saying that Kansas City deserved to lose either of those games. My point is that Josh Allen has been on the other side of heartbreak. So I'm sorry that your teammate cost you the game, and then you're spewing to Josh Allen your tears afterwards. Why should he care? And he clearly did care. He kind of patted Mahomes on the chest, being like, all right, buddy, settle down. Not that maybe he didn't have any sympathy, but dude, that was unbelievable to see Mahomes react like that. Like, not only were you on the plus side of a holding call in the Super Bowl that should have been called. It was the right call. And it's not like the refs waited till after the Toney touchdown yesterday to call Toney for being offsides, which he should have been called for. Like he's screaming at the refs after they failed to convert on fourth down. The right call was made. What did you make of the whole situation?
Yeah, it's kind of like calling 3 seconds in the NBA, you know? It happens a lot, and they don't always call it, you know? It's like they usually don't call it. I think I saw something that said it's been called like 13 times in the past 2 years or something. So, you know, I get why they would be frustrated at that specific call being called, but at the same time, you know, it's like D Ford. The man was not lined up where he was supposed to be. So maybe something about Arrowhead Stadium. I don't know. We learned that Arrowhead Stadium has the drops at night, but maybe it has something to do, get something in people's brains where they line up in the wrong spot. At least this game obviously wasn't as big as D Ford, but yeah, it's just, you know, it sucks because there also was an offside the very next play on Von Miller, and that just goes uncalled, and it's just like,
he wasn't offsides.
Vaughn? Oh, he definitely was. Vaughn was definitely offsides.
When you
100%.
watch the video, he moved with the snap. And when the ball was being snapped, he then crossed the line. He wasn't offsides.
That one was offsides, but
he wasn't.
It's fine. I mean, you know, the Chiefs were the better team, and they lost. And that was a great result for me. Because, I need the Bills to sneak into the playoffs somehow, but still some kind of rough results, honestly, for them. Not as good as you would hope. Denver, Cincinnati even. Cincinnati with Jake Browning. I don't know how they're doing it, but they're doing it. Denver gets the W. I'm still a little bit less excited than I probably should be for my Bills. I got like 30-1 or something. Probably should have just waited and got 40-1, I guess. But yeah, I mean, the Chiefs not. Like, I get why they're frustrated, but, you know, just whatever. The season's very far from over. Just go on to the next one, you know? It's not that big of a deal. It's December, guys. Like, worry about January and February, you know?
Worry about your own player costing you the game. I know we're a betting show, obviously. We're not trying to pull First Take here or anything like that. We're not trying to turn into Skip Bayless versus Stephen A. Smith, but I mean, it would concern me if I had any long-term investment in Kansas City. I mean, this is something that you and I have handicapped into the Kansas City Chiefs and their recent games. Their receivers continue to cost them. I know that Rice came up big down the stretch with that touchdown in the second half, but he also had a play, I think, in the second half where he couldn't separate from Teron Johnson or one of the Bills' corners. The Chiefs receiving core is a major liability.
He had the big fumble. I mean, that was obviously huge, but at the same time, you know, this is just the last guy anybody needs to be worried about. You know, he's the one actually making some positive plays. Yeah, I'm just saying, like, you know, probably need to be dumping on the guys who aren't making the big plays. Like, I get Rice is still making mistakes, but that's fine. Like, the Chiefs need to let him work through those mistakes and just keep getting him the rock because he's one of the actually players who's pretty good and is going to be part of this, you know, team going forward. Yeah, I think the Chiefs. This might be a good thing overall. You know, I'm opposite of you on that. I think like it's fine to lose these games as long as you know everyone takes the right things to heart and gets better. That's what we've seen with this Chiefs team in the past. You know, so maybe a little concerning in the sense that they did feel like they got robbed, which, you know, that was a fair call, so they didn't. You just want everyone to just go back, work harder the next week, you know, and I think that's never been a problem with this team. So hopefully just a situation where everybody works through it. I would think they will because it's a good locker room. It's a good culture. You got a great head coach, so I wouldn't be too worried about it. But yeah, obviously the receiving core being this poor is rough. It's definitely one of the worst, but you know, the defense played very well after a little bit of a rough start. I mean, the Bills basically couldn't do anything after the first quarter. So, that was encouraging after that pretty bad performance against Green Bay that we talked about, where I just think they kind of sleepwalked through that one and just didn't really bring any heat, and just I felt like really vanilla game plan, was pretty disappointing to see, but it was good to see them get back on the horse and perform well. So not something I'm really too worried about going forward.
I don't know, man. I mean, you go back to that Packers game and the Mahomes interception on their second to last possession was probably a result of a poorly run route by Sky Moore. Receiving continues to plague them. They're at the skill position. So, especially again, whether it's Sky Moore or Rashee Rice has made some, like you said, the fumble on top of where he couldn't separate from the Bills cornerback, but obviously redeeming himself, and he's their best receiver. But I would not want any stock in Kansas City going forward. I think they're going to be maybe not the New England game. I don't think I'm looking to fade them against the Patriots here as we look ahead to Week 15, but I'm certainly not looking to buy low, quote unquote, on Kansas City. Not that the market is really pricing that.
That's the problem.
Right.
You're not going to be able to,
But I wouldn't.
Chiefs.
I don't think I would.
Established 4, 5, 6 years that this is the best team in the NFL, and
not this year.
You're just not going to get a good price. I mean
you have an aging Travis Kelce, and like I said, the receiving core is, and you said it too, below league average.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I'm not saying they're the best team by any means. I moved them down one spot in my power ranking this week. But the thing is, though, this year it's not that big of a deal to not be the best. I mean, there's one very good team this year, and that's pretty much it. I mean, it's probably a tier of like 5 or 6 teams after them that's like pretty close, and the Chiefs are in that. And would it be a surprise if one of those teams won and not San Francisco? I mean, no, because this is football. This is NFL football. At the same time, while San Francisco is the best, and I think that's very clear. I think that's been clear for multiple weeks now. Would it be stunning if somebody beat them? Definitely not. They're like a couple points better than these teams, right?
Yeah. I think we're agreeing on the same point. I don't know if I'm with you that Kansas City is in that class, when if you need to score, as we've seen over the last couple of weeks, can your receiving core make a play? We haven't seen it against the Packers and against the Bills yesterday. So.
Yeah, but the other parts of the team are definitely better. That's the thing.
Defensively, sure, but as we've said year in and year out, or at least year in and year out over the last 5 years, offense wins in the NFL as good as your defense is. So.
Yeah,
anyways,
of course. But when you still have Patrick Mahomes, it's like a cheat code, though. You still have a shot because you have the best player on the field, and he might just make enough plays to make it happen. Obviously, somebody's got to grasp the ball with 2 hands, but you hope that a professional player will do that more often than not. So
I'm curious to see how the market kind of prices them come the playoffs, especially if they're on the road, and if that notion applies. Because if it does, we might get an inflated number, but we'll see. So New England against Kansas City. Pats are the home team, coming off of that Thursday Night Football upset win over Pittsburgh as 5.5 point dogs. And New England allowing the second fewest expected points out of EPA per play since Week 10. No Pacheco yesterday against Buffalo, which hindered their run game for sure. When you look at total EPA, when it came to Clyde Edwards-Helaire, at least, had a negative total EPA. So he was not super efficient on the ground. But on the flip side, the Patriots' run defense has been one of the best run defenses, not just since Week 10, but all season. So quickly, how do you handicap this one, Mo, before we move on to Bills and Cowboys?
Yeah, I'm a little bit interested in the Patriots. Like I said, I feel like the Chiefs definitely outplayed the Bills, so it's not because I'm making any kind of downgrade on the Chiefs. And they got hit this morning, man. I mean, you already said it a little bit ago. It was 9.5 across the board this morning, and I guess somebody likes the Chiefs a lot because they got hit, moved up to 10 everywhere. It's honestly more of like, I think the Patriots are playing halfway decent football. I mean, I know they got blanked by the Chargers, but they honestly deserve better in that game, probably. I mean, they moved the ball at times. They just couldn't finish drives. And that's pretty much the same thing that happened to them against the Colts, man. Like, that game probably should have been a win. I mean, they probably should have beat the Giants too. They had those 2 games in a row where they probably should have won. They outplayed the other team in terms of moving the ball and yards from the line of scrimmage, all that type of thing, but just not finishing drives in the red zone, missing field goals. Like, the Patriots have been playing better than their results, and I think they finally got a result that they kind of deserved. I mean, they crushed Pittsburgh on the road, so I think with the Patriots playing somewhat decent, this line being 10, you had a low total where not a lot of points are expected. I think the Patriots are a little underrated, man. I know that sounds crazy, but maybe even like not having a quarterback controversy helps them a little bit. I think at this point, it's obvious everyone is just going to have to get behind Bailey Zappi for the time being. I'm not saying that's any kind of positive situation going forward, but at least it's settled now where Mac Jones is just going to be on the bench. And the defense is playing at a pretty good level, man, especially when you consider how much injury they've experienced this year. I mean, they really have not. They have all the excuses in the world to not be playing well, losing multiple key pieces, and they're still playing pretty solid. Can they slow the Chiefs down? I think with extra time to prep and the Chiefs still not clicking on offense, probably, it's still a big number here. I think I'm going to have some Patriots. It kind of feels like this game should be a little closer to like 7.5 here.
I don't know if I'm going to touch this game. I don't disagree with your handicap. I just don't know if I want to get in front of the Chiefs right now. And I mean, I didn't think they should have been complaining after the game, but at the same time, they're going to come up fired up. And is Bailey Zappi going to be able to score 14, 17 points against Kansas City? Total of 37.5.
That's obviously the scary part. Is
right.
If Josh Allen can barely move the ball against this team, what is Bailey Zappi going to do? But I don't know, man. They at least are targeting the right guys, getting the ball to the right guys. I don't know why.
Juju revenge game.
I don't know why Hunter Henry wasn't a bigger part of this offense this year. Zeke making some plays. I mean, in the passing game too. Probably just need 17 points here to cover this. I mean, can they get to 17? I don't know. Their team total is going to be like 13. So obviously the market is not going to be too bullish on this offense right now, but it does seem like at least everyone's aligned, which I think is probably going to be pretty helpful after there's been a lot of just, strife in that locker room and with the coaching staff under fire, all that type of stuff. So I think I'll have some Patriots at double digits. It just seems a little bit too high to me.
You also know that Belichick, I mean, we see this week after week, and maybe he didn't have to do it too much against Trubisky because they were kind of just playing the run and mixing up their defensive looks at the line of scrimmage to confuse Trubisky, which can always work. But can Belichick do enough to scheme against Mahomes, even if he takes away Kelsey and Rice on some possessions? Like, if you look at Kansas City's yardage outputs and scoring outputs against Belichick-led defenses,
it's not great.
Right. It's not great. So I don't know if I'm looking to back, and that's not to say bet against or bet on the trend. It's just, I think that historical context can matter when you're looking at Belichick scheming against upper echelon quarterbacks. And then you factor in the motivational look for Kansas City with how pissed off they're going to be after that Bills loss. So you're looking at New England potentially. Be sure to check out the Lines Discord channel. The link is over at thelines.com in the top right-hand corner to see if Mo lines up and winds up backing the Patriots ahead of our Thursday episode to beat the closing number, which will release our best bets on. But you can get those in real time by subscribing in the roll section on Discord, at least the Lines Discord. So see if Mo winds up playing the Patriots. Bills and Cowboys, as we touched on and lamented on Kansas City's loss. It was a Bills win, and they are now about 1.5 point favorites against Dallas at home in Week 15. Total of 48.5, 49. Dallas beating the Eagles pretty handily on Sunday Night Football, covering the 3.5 point spread. Dallas lost yards per play, but that was also kind of milking the clock in the second half, and Philly really trying to go all out in the second half. And again, Dallas is up by 3 possessions for much of this game. Eagles fail to score an offensive touchdown. Maybe a bit of or at least going back to Week 13, I think you could argue that was a look-ahead spot for Dallas. facing the Seahawks and how poorly their defense played, and then you get an all-out effort against the Eagles and not allowing a single touchdown. So I didn't take away too much from Dallas's very poor defensive performance against Geno Smith, and they obviously showed up against Philly on Sunday night. You also wonder if maybe on the flip side of that, can you get a letdown, or do you get a letdown from the Cowboys against Buffalo after that huge game? Obviously, this isn't any sort of a must-win from the Cowboys, but depending on how much Dak Prescott wants this MVP, he's now favored to win the NFL MVP award marginally over Brock Purdy. Prescott plus 150 at most shops, and Purdy right around plus 200. We brought up the Prescott pricing about a month ago, 3 or 4 weeks ago, when he was priced at around 30, 40 to 1. And on, conversely, Buffalo fighting for their playoff lives. And they should be able to run the ball. I know we were talking about this before we got going. James Cook, you're not necessarily the biggest fan, but Buffalo's rushing attack, 9th ranked run block win rate against a Cowboys defense. And if you're going to be able to beat Dallas allowing the second highest rushing success rate across the NFL. So how do you handicap this one, Mo, on top of summing it up? Maybe not a cherry on top if you don't agree with the notion that is Buffalo still bettable to win the Super Bowl. You mentioned that you have Bills futures, their odds dip from 50 to 1 to 20 to 1 after their win against the Chiefs. So how do you handicap this matchup? And would you bet on the Bills to win it all before this game kicks off?
I think that's defensible for sure. At the same time, man, this spot, I'm a little bit interested in Dallas, man. This line is telling me these teams are equal, and as high as I've been on the Bills, which obviously I'm higher than the market if I'm betting them to win the Super Bowl and betting them multiple weeks, in the last month or so, I still think the Cowboys are clearly better than the Bills, and this line is telling me that's not the case. You're right a little bit, though, when you do say, we could see maybe a little bit of a letdown here. I mean, it is a road game against an AFC team, cross-conference. Those do tend to be some of the spots where we see some mail-ins from basically anybody, But the Cowboys are still chasing the top seed, man. And I know this is obviously even a bigger game for the Bills. They might need to win out to make the playoffs or close. But
with the tiebreakers, yeah.
Yeah, it's just rough for them. Like I was saying, they could have had some better results. The Broncos winning, the Bengals winning. These were not good things for them. But yeah, the Chiefs, 5.6 yards per play against the Bills. They moved the ball pretty easy on the Bills for most of that game. And, they were kind of sunk by fluky turnovers, a batted pass for an INT, a receiver fumbling, which... these are not super predictive plays. And obviously the big play getting negated by the penalty. Like 17 points is not showing how solid the Chiefs were on offense in that game. And we know Dallas has a more explosive offense and a better ground game than the Chiefs. So I'm a little bit worried for this Bills defense in this spot. I think one thing that plays into their favor as well is preparing for Jalen Hurts. On the Cowboys side, when you face a quarterback like that, rush lane discipline is very important. You have to be, you can't be letting guys get out of collapsed one side of the pocket where they can just like free and clear sprint to one side. There's nobody to stop them. And they did a good job. Hurts, I think when you see, 5 rushing attempts only, that is telling a pretty strong story, because 5 for 30 yards. And I think 2 of those were the Bush pushes, which basically means he had 3 rushing attempts, if I'm remembering right. I think they did that twice. So, yeah, they really did a good job limiting his attempts there, which I think is key. And that's obviously what you need to do against Josh Allen, too. I think the Chiefs did a really good job with that at times as well. Just like making sure the rushers don't run at him too fast so he can just escape outside and just make him make a tough decision under pressure rather than like worrying about getting a sack. I kind of feel like this should be pick 'em or maybe Bills -1. Maybe you just tease the Cowboys, but then again, with what you talked about with some of these letdown spots, maybe that's not the right approach anyways, because you're buying points that you might not might not come into play either way. Like maybe it just ends up being a Cowboys win, or Cowboys don't bring the heat and they just end up losing by 10 or whatever. So I'll have to look at this one and see where the market goes. But yeah, I'm a little bit interested in Dallas because this line is telling me these teams are very, very close, and I have them in the same tier. But I do think the Cowboys clearly look better than the Bills.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to bet this game. I don't think I will. I situationally, as you alluded to, and as I touched on, it definitely favors Buffalo in these kind of spots. I think you have to bake in, which I think the market has started to, the spot for Buffalo and a potential letdown for Dallas here. And that also depends on how you maybe factor in, or if you don't factor in spots into your model. I bake a little bit of an edge into it, and I think the edge is there for Buffalo, especially if you get any sort of an emotional letdown for Dallas. And I think you brought up a really good point too, teasing the Cowboys up to 7.5, or even if this line gets to 2 and then you tease them to 8 with another leg. You go back to the 49ers-Eagles game, and before that line got to Eagles or San Francisco -3, you heard a lot of people saying, or at least some on Gambling X/Twitter, tease the Eagles up. Well, it was a bad situational spot for them. So I think you brought up a really good point. In these potential emotional letdown spots, do you necessarily want to buy points? I don't think so. And I don't think I'm going to have a play on this game. But handicap is fair on your end.
Yeah, it just ends up like a lot of results on the tails. You know what I mean? Like where if Dallas comes up, plays a strong game, like they'll probably just win, right? And
right.
If Dallas comes out and does not play a strong game and they're a little bit sleepy for the first, quarter and a half or whatever it may be, and then they're trying to come back in a negative script, maybe things go awry and they just lose by 10. So you just don't want to be buying points in like an uncertain spot like that.
Agreed 100%. On to Sunday Night Football. Ravens, 3.5 point road favorites at the Jags. The look-ahead line for this game was Baltimore -6.5, but keep in mind that was before Lawrence got cleared to play against the Browns. So we're seeing a little bit of a shift, or a pretty significant shift because of that. Total of 43.5. You were on the Rams yesterday. Shout out to you cashing your bet there. Ravens don't cover, win on a walk-off punt return touchdown in overtime. Baltimore outgained the Rams in yards per play. Lamar Jackson looked really good. You could say that the Ravens got away with a block in the back call on the walk-off punt return touchdown.
You could say that and you'd be right.
Definitely should have been. I thought there were some calls that went against the Ravens, whether it was the DPI call against Marlon Humphrey. Stafford attacked him, but I don't know whether it was Atwell or whichever receiver for the Rams kind of holding Humphrey down, and then the ball was clearly out of bounds. That set up poor field position for Baltimore, which led to the safety. But either way, Ravens should not have gotten a touchdown in overtime. See, I admit when at least I have futures position on a team and they got the benefit of a call, though. Just saying. And looking at some of the quarterback performances, I mentioned Lamar played really well, which he did. Third highest EPA plus completion percentage over expected composite ranking in week 14. Brock Purdy, number 1. Jake Browning, number 2 against the Colts. Mo, who had the fourth best? I'm going to give you one guess here. Fourth best EPA plus completion percentage over expected composite ranking in week 14.
Jake Browning.
I said Jake Browning was second.
Oh, did you? Yeah. Patrick Mahomes. I know he had
Zach
a really
Wilson.
high EPA. Zach Wilson. He had a good game. I mean, I feel like that was maybe a little bit of a, I don't know. I feel bad for the Texans, man. I feel like they just crumbled. Everybody getting hurt. It's just, yeah, I feel for them because they should really be like on track for a playoff game, exciting situation, rookie quarterback, amazing debut, and just everything's going south for them at the end of the year. But, a lot of good times ahead, I think. So hopefully.
There's the glass half full approach from Mel. I respect it. And looking on the other side, quarterback-wise, Trevor Lawrence, 5th lowest quarterback efficiency / PFF grade, Pro Football Focus grade in week 14, coming off the ankle injury on Monday Night Football. So short-ish week for the Jags and it showed. Even though they made that game semi-competitive in the fourth quarter, Cleveland's defense stepped up at home. And when you look at their home road splits, I don't always or really ever factor that in. But the Browns defense has played much better.
There does seem to be. Yeah, there definitely does seem to be something going on there. I don't know whether it's extra crowd noise is the straw that breaks these offenses' backs or what's going on there. But this defense at home is just something else.
Yeah, and the Jags struggled with pass protection in that matchup against Cleveland, and they're going up against the Ravens, 12th ranked, at least going into Week 14, 12th ranked pass rush win rate. Baltimore right up there when it comes to sacks overall. How are you betting this one if you are, Mel?
Interested in the Jaguars for sure here, but it's obviously an uncertain spot with the ankle injury, and we don't know what another week of healing is going to do for Trevor Lawrence. Obviously, we saw like a similar situation last year with Patrick Mahomes, but he didn't have to play 2 weeks in a row, so we don't know what he would look like the third week, right? Because we got to see him in the Super Bowl 4 weeks later, I believe is how it worked out. He could still move a little bit. He had that one long run he ripped off. I saw Lawrence scramble once or twice, I think. He obviously didn't have his usual force, just kind of looking to avoid contact and get the free yards. So, it'll be interesting to see how the Ravens approach it, whether they want to bring a little bit of extra heat. I think Lawrence can be a little erratic against the blitz at times when he is throwing off his back foot. He can let his mechanics get a little awry sometimes, but I at the same time, I just look at this line and I just wonder what this line would have been 2 weeks ago, with a healthy Trevor Lawrence before they obviously laid that egg against Cincinnati. I don't know, man. I feel like it would be maybe Ravens -2 at most. I could even see this being close to a pick 'em. I mean, the Ravens closed -3 at the Chargers, right? And I think the whole world had the Jags rated ahead of the Chargers, and maybe not by a ton at that point, but I think everybody pretty much has the Jags ahead of the Chargers, and the Ravens were -3 on the road there in probably the friendliest road environment there is in the NFL. So I'm thinking maybe 3.5 might be too much here. I am concerned about the lack of outside wide receiver play for the Jaguars. I mean, you have Calvin Ridley, who I think is pretty much having to play on the outside now. He's been markedly better in his career when he gets to play out of the slot. So that situation doesn't really favor them. But I think as long as Lawrence's offensive line protects him, which you talked a little bit about, but the Ravens have been a little bit iffy in terms of the pass rush, middle of the pack pressure rate. The Jags have been a bit above average in protecting their quarterback. They are 10th in adjusted sack rate. And we saw if you do protect your quarterback, you can beat this Baltimore secondary. I mean, Matt Stafford did it, over 7 yards per attempt, plenty of volume, scored a lot of points, wasn't in garbage time. They were back and forth the whole game. So I think Trevor Lawrence can probably do something similar. He does some pretty good work on those timing routes at times as well. I would say he works a little bit deeper down the field better than Matt Stafford, so it might come down to that because he's probably not quite as good as Stafford at those crossing type stuff. We saw he made some pretty great throws at times. Definitely the one in the end zone was tremendous in the corner of the end zone. Not too many quarterbacks are going to make that play. But Trevor Lawrence can be good at those throws as well. So I'm thinking this might be a little bit too high, but if people are not believing in Lawrence, which I can totally understand given the injury, we could maybe see this line go the other way. So I'm not in a hurry to bet this one, but interested in the Jaguars.
At the same time, you mentioned Baltimore secondary, and Humphrey got exploited on a couple of explosive passing plays yesterday and probably should have had a pick to seal the game. Drop that. But if you look at the Jags' last 5 games against San Francisco, Tennessee, Houston, Cincinnati, Jake Browning on a Monday night, maybe a little bit of a lack of motivation in that game, but I'll hit on that in a second when it comes to the collective stretch defensively, especially when it comes to secondary play. And then the Browns yesterday against Joe Flacco. So in their last 5 games from weeks 10 through 14, Jags ranked 25th in EPA per dropback allowed. And let's see here, 30th in dropback success rate allowed. And now you're going up against a very explosive Ravens passing game, and Lamar playing very well, if not better, when it comes to explosive passing plays and just from an overall passing efficiency than he did in his MVP year when he was really trying to run the ball and really trying to escape the pocket. I mean, I think he's really adjusted to Todd Monken's scheme, and that shows in the results when it comes to quarterback efficiency. So I know you said the Ravens secondary can be exploited if Trevor Lawrence's ankle is better, in better shape, but Jags secondary, when it comes to competition in their last 5 weeks, and that includes facing the Titans and Will Levis, who has underperformed expectations after showing up on Thursday night and the week before that against Atlanta, two below-average defenses, at least when it comes to passing defense. I'm not super sold on this Jags defense, man. So I was considering Baltimore when I saw 3 pop earlier when this dipped to 3, but it quickly shot back up. Maybe I'll try to look to bet this game live. I don't think I'm going to have a play on the Jags, though, because that secondary and their results of late against very competent offenses definitely scares me.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, I definitely think this secondary and this defense overall, I mean, I definitely was low on this secondary coming into the season and low on this defense in general, but the notion that they're maybe regressing to what they probably should be, which is a middle of the pack defense, is probably legitimate. Definitely agree that the Cincy game, some probably lack of motivation baked in. I know it was a primetime game, but I mean, these players know they're 10-point favorites, man. I mean, they're going to be a little bit sleepy in those spots, and Jake Browning's been playing well. You know, all credit to the Bengals and their coaching staff. So they got their players ready, and the Jags were a little bit sleepy, and they paid for it. You know, this is the NFL. That happens. So, yeah, I just think, man, it's still 3.5 points with a pretty good team at home here. So I don't put the Ravens in the type of elite tier that would be, I think, laying that type of number against a good team on the road. Like I already said, I think the 49ers are pretty much by themselves. Maybe the Cowboys, you could argue, are right there, not too far behind them, but it's just a lot of pretty similar teams after that. And I think before the last few weeks, you could have guessed the Jags might be in there, but they maybe look like they might be in like a third tier after that at this point, but it's still getting 3.5 at home here in a big spot. So I'm interested in the Jags, but definitely not something I'm running to the window to bet at this point. So we'll see if the line keeps moving around. I didn't know it was down to 3, so that definitely signals that maybe Sharps only like the Ravens at 3 and nothing higher than that.
Yeah, and to your point, when we initially got into this handicap, Lawrence's ankle may be playing into the market perception of this game. When you think about, okay, why is Baltimore, if Baltimore closes 3.5 against the Jags when San Francisco, granted, coming off of what, a 2 or 3 game losing streak, so that certainly played into market perception and just their market rating going into that game after the bye where Jacksonville was coming off the bye too, but 49ers closed as field goal favorites on the road. So you have to take into account all the market perception with San Francisco coming off that losing streak and the Lawrence injury as to why the Ravens may close at this number. I'm not saying that means that you shouldn't bet Jacksonville, but what I'm saying is that, okay, why is Baltimore closing higher at Jacksonville than the 49ers did? I think there's a plausible explanation as to why the market thinks that. So just my perception there. So be sure to check out our Discord channel for when Mo and I bet the Jets. I am on the edge. I'm hoping to get a better number, but considering the Jets, we'll put it that way. Definitely on the list of potential Week 15 bets. So be sure to check out our Discord channel. The link is over at thelines.com in the top right-hand corner where you'll find all of our bets, whether it's Week 15 or anything, any sport. I'll have a new college basketball podcast up with Eric Haslam from Haslametrics later in the week. I think Thursday morning is when that's going to come out. And we'll have a new episode to beat the closing number on Thursday afternoon, at least in Apple, Spotify, wherever you find your favorite podcast. Remember, if you're looking to bet any NFL action and you're a first-time user with BetMGM Sportsbook, you can use promo code THELINES, one word, to get up to $1,500 back in bonus bets. That's the lines, one word. And if your first bet loses, you'll get those bonus bets up to $1,500. Remember that bonus bets are not equivalent to real money. Mo, any last words before we get out of here? And hopefully Tommy DeVito cashes for you against the number.
Yeah, I mean, that's all I'm hoping for. So other than that, let's go Tyreek Hill Tua because, man, my $500 league, This is the lifeline. I need 42 from them. So let's root for a lot of Miami points.
Would you, if the Chiefs lose in the first round of the playoffs, would you blame it on Taylor Swift?
No, I would blame it on probably the Chiefs not putting together a good enough team and Travis Kelce finally declining. I mean, I've been waiting for this for years. I thought he was slowing down 3-4 years ago, like noticeably, but fact of the matter is, you know, his route running and his tackle breaking did make up for his lack of speed. So, I'm amazed he made it this far, man. I really am. Like, the guy is positively ancient for a high volume NFL pass catcher. So hats off to him for what he's done. But I think Rashee Rice is very obviously needs to be the top target next year, even if Kelce comes back, which I'm not even certain is going to happen at this point.
Taylor Swift may have jumped on the bandwagon too late. Maybe she'll consider one of the names of our singles that we announced earlier in lieu of her mistake. We'll see. Maybe we'll have an announcement on the next episode of Beat the Closing Number. But for Mo, you can follow him on X Twitter at Moneylines 2Ws. You can follow me at Eli Herskovich. Follow the lines at the Lines US. Be sure to check out all of our content, breakdowns, all of my best bets article up Wednesday night, Wednesday afternoon, something like that. So be sure to check that out later in the week. Thanks for watching and listening to another edition of Beat the Closing Number. So long, everybody.